The US Open just got turned upside down. Micky Lawler, the most powerful woman in women's tennis, just made a decision so bold, so unexpected, and so shocking that fans across the globe have completely lost their minds. This wasn't just another routine announcement. This was a thunderclap that echoed through every tennis court, every living room, and every social media feed on the planet. Lawler didn't just make a call, she drew a line in the sand, and she challenged the very foundation of how we think about the sport. And the fans? They didn't just react, they blood. Get ready, because Micky Lawler's stunning US Open call is about to change the game forever, and the world is still picking its jaw up off the floor. The tennis world was going about its business, humming along with the predictable rhythm of pre-tournament press conferences and practice sessions when the bomb dropped. It wasn't a player who caused the uproar, nor was it an injury or a last-minute withdrawal. It was Micky Lawler, the indomitable WTA president, who stepped up to the microphone and detonated a shockwave that would be felt from the hard courts of New York to the clay of Paris and the grass of London. For weeks, the whispers had been circulating. Rumors of a potential change, a radical shift in the structure of the US Open, had been floating around the locker rooms and the executive suites, but no one took them seriously. Lawler, however, is not a woman who deals in rumors. She deals in reality, and her reality is one where the sport must evolve or risk being left behind. As she approached the podium, a hushed silence fell over the assembled journalists. They knew that when Micky Lawler speaks, the world listens. Her presence commands respect, not through fear, but through an unshakable aura of authority that she has cultivated over decades of service to the sport. She adjusted the microphone, her eyes scanning the room with a calm intensity that betrayed nothing of the storm she was about to unleash. The anticipation was suffocating. Then she spoke, and her words were like a thunderclap in a clear blue sky. She announced that the US Open, the crown jewel of American tennis, would be undergoing a transformation unlike anything seen in its storied history. She did not mince words. She did not offer diplomatic platitudes. She laid out a vision so bold, so audacious that for a moment, the journalists simply stared in stunned silence. The world expected a minor rule change or a scheduling adjustment. Instead, Micky Lawler delivered a manifesto. The fans, who were watching live streams across the globe, didn't just hear it. They felt it. Their reactions were instantaneous, and they were explosive. Social media platforms crashed under the weight of the initial surge of comments. It was a moment that transcended tennis. It was a cultural event, a defining moment that would be discussed for generations. Lawler had not just made a decision. She had ignited a revolution, and the world was watching, breathless and wide-eyed. As the initial shockwaves of the announcement began to settle, the sheer magnitude of Micky Lawler's decision started to sink in. The journalists, who had been rendered momentarily speechless, began to frantically dissect her words, searching for nuance, looking for loopholes, but finding none. Lawler had been crystal clear. The US Open, traditionally a bastion of tradition and the final Grand Slam of the year, was about to become the testing ground for a radical new format. She revealed that the tournament would be expanding its player pool, not just for the main draw, but for the qualifying rounds, creating an unprecedented opportunity for players ranked outside the top 100. This was a direct challenge to the entrenched elite, a populist move that immediately resonated with the underdogs and the rising stars of the game. But that was just the beginning. Lawler went further, announcing that the US Open would introduce a dynamic scoring system for the early rounds, designed to speed up the pace of play and make the matches more viewer-friendly for the next generation of fans. This was a direct hit at the traditionalists, who argue that tennis is perfect the way it is. Lawler argued with passion and conviction that the sport must adapt to survive, that the future belongs to those who are willing to take risks. The reaction from the fans was immediate and visceral. Across social media, the hashtag #LawlerBombshell began trending globally within minutes. Videos of fans reacting in real time went viral, showing people in bars, in living rooms, and even on the streets of New York, their faces a mixture of joy, shock, and disbelief. Some fans were weeping with joy, celebrating what they saw as the democratization of a sport that has long been accused of being too exclusive. Others were furious, decrying it as a betrayal of tradition, a cheapening of the Grand Slam experience. The divide was stark, and it was passionate. Lawler had succeeded in doing what few had ever done. She had made the US Open the most talked-about event in the world, and the tournament hadn't even started yet. The players themselves were divided, with some veterans expressing quiet concern about the changes, while the younger players, the ones who stand to benefit the most, were openly ecstatic. Micky Lawler had thrown a grenade into the heart of the tennis establishment, and she was standing back, watching the fireworks with a knowing smile. In the eye of the storm, Micky Lawler remained remarkably composed, but the pressure was mounting. The world was demanding answers, and she was ready to provide them. In a series of follow-up interviews and impromptu press gatherings, she elaborated on her vision, offering a glimpse into the strategic thinking that had led her to make such a monumental decision. She spoke passionately about the need to grow the game, to make it more accessible to a younger and more diverse audience. She cited declining viewership among the under-30 demographic and the alarming trend of younger players abandoning the sport in favor of faster-paced alternatives. Lawler made it clear that she did not make this decision lightly. She revealed that the WTA had been conducting extensive research for years, analyzing viewership data, fan engagement metrics, and player feedback. The conclusion was inescapable. Tennis was at a crossroads, and if it did not evolve, it would stagnate. She painted a picture of a future where tennis is the most popular sport in the world, not just for the elite, but for everyone. Her voice, usually calm and measured, took on a fervent edge as she argued that the US Open, with its rich history and global stage, was the perfect platform to launch this revolution. She admitted that she expected backlash, that she knew the traditionalists would cry foul, but she argued, with a conviction that moved many, that the future of the sport depends on courage, not complacency. The fan reaction to these follow-up statements was even more explosive. Those who initially supported her decision felt vindicated, their belief in her leadership solidified. Those who opposed it felt even more entrenched in their outrage. The debate raged on talk shows and sports columns and in the comments sections of every news outlet. Memes flooded social media, some mocking the changes, others celebrating Lawler as a visionary. The emotional spectrum was vast, from tears of joy to screams of frustration. One fan was captured on video screaming, "She's ruining tennis," while another was shown dancing in the streets, holding a sign that read, "Lawler for President." The world was divided but united in one thing. Everyone was talking about Micky Lawler and the US Open. She had become the most polarizing figure in the sport, a lightning rod for all the hopes and fears of a global community that loves tennis with a fierce and often irrational passion. As the dust began to settle on the initial shock and the emotional reaction started to evolve, the focus shifted to the logistical realities of Micky Lawler's stunning decision. The tennis world, which had been operating on a well-oiled, predictable rhythm, was now scrambling to adapt to the new paradigm she had created. The US Open organizers, who had been kept in the loop during the planning stages, were now in full implementation mode, working around the clock to ensure that the changes could be executed seamlessly. But the real drama was unfolding on the practice courts and in the players' lounges. The veterans of the tour, the players who had built their careers on the old system, were grappling with the implications of the new format. Some of them spoke privately of feeling betrayed, of believing that the changes devalued their years of hard work. They felt that the expansion of the player pool diluted the prestige of the tournament. However, they were careful not to criticize Lawler publicly, knowing that she is one of the most powerful and respected figures in the sport. Instead, they offered cautious, diplomatic responses, choosing their words carefully. On the other hand, the younger players, the rising stars who had been struggling to break through the glass ceiling, were openly jubilant. They saw Lawler's decision as a lifeline, a golden opportunity to prove themselves on the biggest stage. For them, it was a validation of their dreams, a signal that the sport was finally opening its doors to the next generation. The fans, who had been the primary catalyst for the emotional explosion, continued to be the most vocal and passionate element of the entire saga. Fan forums were flooded with heated debates, with supporters and detractors going back and forth with an intensity that bordered on obsession. In the streets of New York, the mood was electric. Merchandise vendors were selling out of US Open gear, and the talk of the town was solely about Lawler's decision. It was a phenomenon that no one could have predicted. A quiet, administrative announcement had transformed into a full-blown cultural movement. Micky Lawler had not just made a call. She had given the fans something to believe in, and they were responding with a fervor that had not been seen in tennis for decades. The US Open was no longer just a tennis tournament. It was a battleground for the soul of the sport, and Lawler was the general leading the charge. The final chapter of this incredible saga was written not in a press conference but in the hearts of the fans who had been captivated by the entire drama. Micky Lawler, having weathered the initial storm, stood tall as the architect of a new era for the US Open and for tennis as a whole. Her decision, once so controversial, began to find its footing as the logistics became clear and the excitement of the approaching tournament took over. The players, both veterans and newcomers, began to embrace the change, recognizing the unique opportunity it presented. The veterans, initially skeptical, started to see the benefits of a more dynamic and engaging tournament that would attract more fans and generate more buzz. The younger players, energized by the possibility of a breakthrough, trained with a renewed sense of purpose. The fans, who had been shouting from the rooftops, were now booking their tickets and making their plans, eager to be a part of history. Lawler, in a final emotional interview, reflected on the whirlwind of the past few days. She spoke of her love for the sport, her belief in its potential, and her unwavering commitment to doing what is right, even when it is difficult. She acknowledged the pain and the anger of those who opposed her, but she stood by her decision with a quiet, unshakable confidence. She looked directly into the camera and said, "I made this call for the fans. I made it for the future. The game is bigger than any one person, and if we don't have the courage to change, we will be left behind." Her words resonated deeply, silencing even her most vocal critics. The US Open, under the shadow of her stunning decision, was set to be the most talked about, most watched, and most unpredictable tournament in history. Micky Lawler had not just made a call. She had made a statement. She had shown the world that tennis is not just a sport. It is a living, breathing entity that must evolve to survive. As the first ball was set to be struck on the iconic courts of Flushing Meadows, one thing was perfectly clear. Micky Lawler had changed a game forever, and the fans were more than ready for it. If you enjoyed this latest tennis update and want to stay ahead of the biggest stories in the world, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel right now. Turn on the notification bell so you never miss a moment of the action. See you in the next video.